Welcome to the Rugby Obsession Deep Dive. Before we really get going today, I just want to say, if you love analyzing the tactical, strategic, and, well, sometimes highly controversial sides of the game, take a second right now to subscribe to Rugby Obsession.
Yeah, you definitely want to subscribe. I mean, it really is the best place to be for this kind of in-depth analysis.
For sure.
Yeah.
So today, we're looking at this massive stack of recent rugby reports, primarily from Planet Rugby, and we are focusing on the Springboks' incredibly controversial strategy for the upcoming 12 months.
Right. And I mean, there's just so much happening beneath the surface of the sport right now.
Oh, completely. And, you've probably faced a situation in your own life or maybe your career where you had to take a short-term hit to achieve a massive long-term goal. Well, today, we're looking at how that exact strategy is playing out at the absolute highest level of international rugby.
Yeah, it's basically the ultimate sports management dilemma, isn't it? Like, do you chase the immediate glory or do you quietly build the foundation for the ultimate prize?
Exactly. And I really want to set a positive tone right here at the top. We aren't digging into these reports to criticize. Honestly, we are just marveling at the absolutely innovative, calculated approach we're seeing from their head coach, Erasmus.
Oh, absolutely. It's a fascinating approach.
But, I do want to throw down a challenge for us as we go through this. Is this a masterclass in long-term planning? Or, is he just giving himself a built-in excuse to lose this year?
That's the perfect lens to view this through because the stakes really could not be higher.
So let's start with the rumor mill, which is the juicy part. This all kicked off recently on the Rivals podcast. Victor Matfield, the Springboks legend, he dropped this massive hint.
Right, and he's the record cap holder, which is a huge detail.
Yeah, exactly. So he says he has, quote, heard that South Africa might be sending a B team, basically a heavily weakened squad, over to the Northern Hemisphere for the Nations Championship later this year.
Wow. And, for context, we really need to understand what the Nations Championship actually is. I mean, it's not just a friendly tour.
Right.
It's this massive commercial enterprise. It's designed to pit the absolute best of the Northern Hemisphere against the best of the Southern Hemisphere.
So there's a lot of money on the line.
Oh, tons. Enormous broadcasting rights, massive sponsorship deals. So if the reigning back-to-back world champions show up with a B team, well, it really threatens the tournament's bottom line.
Yeah, and the reports explicitly compare this to France's decision to rest their star players for the July tests, which was hugely controversial.
Exactly.
Actually, let's talk about those French July tests for a second. Like, what was the mechanism behind the uproar when France did that?
Well, it was basically a clash of priorities between club and country. The French domestic league is just incredibly grueling, and it stretches super late into the summer.
Right.
So the national coaches looked at the biological data, and they realized their best players were facing severe physical burnout. So they just made the executive decision to rest them and send a developmental squad instead.
And the host nations were furious, right?
Oh, absolutely furious. They had spent millions marketing a clash against the mighty French. Fans bought expensive tickets, and it just created this massive political nightmare.
Which makes perfect sense. You promise the fans a blockbuster movie, and you deliver the understudy cast.
Yeah, exactly.
But what I loved in these reports was the reaction from ex-Ireland star Andrew Trimble on that Rivals podcast. When Matfield dropped the rumor, Trimble didn't get mad. He just laughed and said, Rassie's done the sums. He's always scheming his move.
Always scheming. I mean, that really is the perfect description of how the rugby world views Erasmus. They know every chaotic move is tied to a meticulous spreadsheet somewhere.
Okay, let's unpack this because this strategy feels less like a sports decision and more like managing a volatile financial portfolio to me.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right, like a chess grandmaster sacrificing a knight just to set up a guaranteed checkmate 3 moves later.
Yeah.
But I do have to push back a little. Doesn't it disrespect the immediate competition? And isn't it a dangerous gamble with the team's momentum?
Well, what's fascinating here is the brutal biomechanical reality of the modern calendar. I mean, the physical toll the game takes today is just unprecedented.
Yeah, the collisions are insane.
Exactly. So Erasmus isn't doing this to disrespect the tournament. He is purely focused on player welfare and a strict 4-year World Cup cycle. He's prioritizing key performance when it truly counts over immediate league points.
Right, because if your best players are physically broken by the time the World Cup rolls around, those commercial league points from a year ago don't help you at all.
Not even a little bit. You know, a head coach has to act like an actuary managing a finite physical resource.
Yeah.
If you spend all your capital in November 2026, you'll be biologically bankrupt by the World Cup in 2027.
Biologically bankrupt. That is a great phrase. And, while Matfield called it a rumor, if we look closely at the coach's past comments, this whole scheme is just hiding in plain sight.
Oh, yeah. He's been incredibly transparent about his methodology. You just have to actually listen to the mechanisms of what he's saying.
Well, let's dive into that calculus. The sources lay it out perfectly with these quotes from Erasmus from December 2025. He has two massive priorities that outweigh the nation's championship.
Right.
First is the greatest rivalry series, which is 4 tests against the All Blacks. And second, obviously, the 2027 Rugby World Cup in Australia, which is only 18 months away.
And 18 months is the critical window. That's exactly when a coaching staff has to transition from experimenting into finalizing their exact 33-man roster.
Before we dig into RASSIE'S exact quotes on this, I want to take a quick second to remind you to subscribe to Rugby Obsession. And honestly, we really want to hear from you.
Yeah, definitely let us know in the comments.
Exactly. What are your thoughts on sacrificing a major tournament for World Cup prep? Drop a comment. Is it brilliant, or does it ruin the magic of annual tournaments?
I'm really curious to see where listeners land on that, especially the ones buying tickets.
Seriously. So getting back to the reports, Erasmus asked this rhetorical question. He said, would you rather lift the Nations Cup trophy or be ready for the World Cup? And he stated point blank that world rankings aren't important this year.
Which is just a staggering admission for a Tier 1 head coach. I mean, global rankings dictate sponsorships, funding, everything. But he's just openly discarding that metric.
He really is. And he used this boxing analogy. He said he's willing to take a few shots and maybe an uppercut to build a competitive 2027 team.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Taking an uppercut is fine in theory, but what happens if that uppercut completely knocks out the team's momentum and confidence? Like, if young guys get hammered by Ireland by 40 points, doesn't that destroy them psychologically?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, that is the exact psychological tightrope he is walking. You have to look at the other half of his quote.
Okay.
He explicitly said you don't want to be punch drunk next year by December. He wants a championship core that is physically vibrant and mentally fresh.
Right.
And as for the young players taking the hits, that is a calculated, brutal stress test.
A stress test. So he's intentionally throwing them into the deep end against top-tier teams, expecting them to struggle, just to see who has the mental resilience to survive.
Precisely. I mean, think about the pressure of a World Cup semifinal. It's suffocating. If a young player's confidence is completely shattered by a tough tour in 2026, well, they probably weren't going to survive a World Cup knockout game anyway.
Wow. It's ruthless, but it's incredibly efficient data gathering.
But, I mean, you can only do that if there's a safety net, right? You can't just throw rookies to the wolves without a strong culture.
Exactly. To survive those metaphorical uppercuts, you need an absolutely unshakable foundational culture.
Which leads us perfectly into how Erasmus is quietly managing his personnel behind the scenes. The remaining Planet Rugby articles show a guy operating on a totally different level. Like, he recently hosted a virtual alignment camp.
Yes, a virtual alignment camp. We definitely need to explain how this works because it's a fascinating modern solution. It really is, especially when you look at who was on the call. He had 16 World Cup winners logging in alongside an uncapped duo.
Right.
So he's bridging the gap between legends and new blood over a screen. But how does a virtual camp actually benefit a collision-based sport?
Well, because international rugby is as much about cognitive processing as it is about physical dominance. During these Zoom calls, they aren't tackling, they are breaking down tape.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they're establishing play-calling terminology, defensive structures, and the cultural expectations of being a Springbok. By doing this virtually, he keeps the veterans integrated tactically without putting any physical wear and tear on their bodies.
He's basically downloading the software into the rookies without wearing out the hardware of the veterans.
Yeah.
That is brilliant.
It really is.
And he's also incredibly hands-on with the physical biology of his players.
Yeah.
He convinced star prop Franz Malherbe to shelve his retirement plans. And he's supporting Trevor Nyakane coming back from injury. And the detail that stood out, Erasmus noted that Nyakane is actually 2 years younger in rugby terms because of his time out injured.
We really need to unpack that because Rugby miles versus chronological age is crucial here. The props in the front row, they are the absolute engine room of the Springboks' physical identity.
And playing in the front row is essentially like being in a series of minor car crashes every single weekend, right?
That is an incredibly accurate way to describe it. The force on their spine and joints is staggering. So when Nia Kane was rehabbing his injury, he was avoiding those weekly traumatic collisions.
Right.
It essentially stops the biological clock on his joints. It turns a devastating injury into an accidental fountain of youth. Erasmus is carefully managing these veterans because physical rest literally adds years to their careers.
It's just phenomenal sports science application.
Yeah.
And even rival figures see it. Eddie Jones hailed Erasmus as a rugby guru.
Yeah, and Jones knows a thing or two about the dark arts of coaching.
Exactly. And even though Jones admitted he didn't love some of Erasmus's past innovations, the respect for his underlying genius is undeniable.
When Eddie Jones publicly calls you a guru, you are definitely operating on a higher strategic plane.
And Erasmus even stepped in to defend the English head coach, Steve Borthwick, during a sudden dip in form during the Six Nations. He warned the English media not to panic and abandon Borthwick's plan, which is such an insightful comment. By defending Borthwick, Erasmus is defending the concept of long-term planning itself. He knows how hard it is to build a 4-year foundation while the public screams for immediate results.
So what does this all mean? When I look at the virtual alignment camps, the B team stress test rumors, the biological manager, it's like he's a master conductor of an orchestra.
Oh, I like that.
He's keeping his star violinists in tune via virtual camps while he's off auditioning a completely new brass section on the pitch. That analogy holds up perfectly, and it highlights the brilliant contradiction in his style. He is fiercely competitive and hates losing, yet he is entirely willing to embrace short-term failure to innovate and build depth.
He's just hacking the traditional sports calendar system.
He really is. By keeping veterans aligned virtually, he creates the psychological safety net. So when the B team goes north, those rookies can experiment without the paralyzing pressure of carrying the entire Springbok legacy on their shoulders.
Because they know the veterans are perfectly rested and ready to return. It's a psychological masterstroke.
Exactly, and it ensures that when they face the All Blacks, the A team is cohesive and hungry, rather than exhausted from chasing nations championship points they don't actually need.
It's just amazing to see the matrix behind the decisions. So, just to quickly recap our journey today, we unpack the rumors of a Springboks B team and the commercial uproar it might cause. We analyzed RASSIE'S deliberate calculus to prioritize the World Cup and the All Blacks series, taking those uppercuts to protect his veterans. And we marveled at his behind-the-scenes orchestration that proves why he's a rugby guru.
It truly is a comprehensive blueprint for sustainable success in an unsustainable physical environment.
Seriously, jump into the comments and let us know your opinions. Is this deliberate resting a stroke of genius or a dangerous game that disrespects the fans?
You know, this raises an important question. If Erasmus's strategy is wildly successful and they win the 2027 World Cup after overtly resting their best players in 2026, will every other Tier 1 nation copy this model?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And if they do, what happens to the prestige and commercial value of massive annual tournaments like the Nations Championship if nobody sends their A team anymore?
Man, that is the million-dollar question for the sports executives. It could cause a true paradigm shift. Well, if you enjoyed breaking down these strategic layers, please hit subscribe to Rugby Obsession so you don't miss out. Thank you for listening to the Rugby Obsession Deep Dive, and we'll look forward to you listening to our next episode.